Hi, Susan. This is Cindy. Just confirming I'm on in case you need any assistance or want me to monitor the waiting room.
Wonderful. Thank you. I do have Carly is assisting and Claire should be on at any moment to assist as well, but we appreciate you as the backup to the backup.
All right. Perfect.
Thank you to everyone who has logged on so far. We will get started in a few minutes. As a reminder, you can ask questions after the presentation by either raising your hand in the MS Teams platform, putting your question into the chat and I'll read it aloud, or you could also email townhall@fallschurchva.gov. And I will moderate and call on each person or read the question as we go through them. We will get started in about 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm in the waiting room.
We've had a few more people log on since my last announcement. You are in the right place if you're looking for the West Falls Church Project Town Hall meeting. We will get started in a few minutes, in about 2 minutes. You can ask questions by after the presentation is given by raising your hand in MS Teams or putting your question into the chat and I can read it aloud. You can also email townhall@fallschurchva.gov and I will moderate and call on each person or read the question aloud as we go along. We are recording this town hall and it will be posted to the project website after it has been processed, so sometime later today. We are about 1 minute away from the town hall starting. Great, as the few more folks come in, I'll make one last announcement. You can ask questions after the presentation by either raising your hands in MS Teams or typing it into the chat. I will call on each person to ask their question, or I can read your question from the chat aloud. If you prefer to email your question, you can do so at townhall@fallschurchva.gov. This town hall is being recorded and we will post it to the project website later today. And thank you everyone for coming. We do ask that everyone mute their mics if they are not speaking or asking a question. That helps with the background noise. All right, Wyatt, you do have presentation capabilities, and certainly whenever you are ready to start, we can.
Well, thank you, Susan, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining for this town hall meeting to provide the community with an update on the proposed amendments to the comprehensive agreement for the development of the West Falls project, the 10-acre site immediately adjacent to the high school. My name is Wyatt Shields. I'm the city manager, and I will take us through some slides this afternoon. And really, this is an opportunity to get information again out to the public on these changes, and also to answer questions and just respond to any comments that the public has. Before we get started, Mayor Tarter is in this meeting with us, and I note that several other council members are online as well. But Mayor Tarter, would you like to say any welcoming remarks?
I tell you, I'll be brief, but I do want to thank everyone for joining us today. This transaction is very important to the city, and it's very complicated. And so we want to make sure that the public is fully informed about what's going on. The action is planned for Monday. So if you do have comments, today would be a good day, or you can respond or reach out to council members privately through email or phone calls and the like. But we on council are very interested in your thoughts and comments about this. As Wyatt did mention, we do have, I think, probably most of our council here on this meeting today. I see Dave Snyder on the screen. I believe Phil Duncan is joining us. I can't really tell from the rest of the screen who's here, but I would wager to say that the majority of our council is with us today because this is so important to our community, and particularly what your thoughts are about it. So with that, I'm just going to say we welcome your input, and we look forward to hearing what you have to think about this. And Wyatt, I'll turn it back over to you, and let's get started.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mayor Tarter. I'll note also that before I get started on the slides, that we also have representatives of Falls Church Gateway Partners, which is the city's selected development partner for the West Falls project. Robin Betterell with Hoffman Associates is on the call. Amy Friedlander with EYA is on the call, and there may be other representatives as well. So thank you all for joining. When we get to the question and answer period, our developer partner would be welcome to join in and responding to questions as well. So let me share my screen and put some slides up, if I may. And let me put that to full screen mode. Can everyone, Susan, can you see these slides?
Yes, that looks good.
Okay. So what we'll talk about is changes to the comprehensive agreement that have come about from the construction and commercial real estate markets, and some of the particular areas where in the commercial and in the terms of new commercial real estate investment, that there are issues today related to COVID. And those are in the hospitality realm, office, and retail. And these are very important components to the city, both for the vibrancy of the site that we're trying to accomplish, the vision for a walkable, enjoyable, and very active pedestrian and commercial environment there. A lot of those sectors are experiencing difficulties right now with the economic fallout from COVID. The Falls Church Gateway Partners, which is our development team, they've requested changes, and we'll review those today. In terms of our process, we did have a series of discussions in executive session because these are changes to a real estate transaction in the months this fall. We came out with a public presentation of these changes on December 14th. We held a town hall meeting just 3 days after that. This is a second town hall meeting today, and as the mayor noted just a moment ago, we're working towards council consideration of a resolution that would grant authority to me to execute these changes with the development team. Just in terms of those who might be new to this project, there's a lot of history here that stretches back really probably 7 to 8 years of planning. But some of the key milestones include in November 2017, when the voters approved $120 million bond issuance for the new high school. And part of the plan of finance that was explained to the voters in many presentations and in our formal plan of finance also that we presented to the rating agencies included the lease of 10 acres of the current high school campus for private development. And to execute that plan, in March of 2018, we issued an RFP. In November of 2018, the city selected Falls Church Gateway Partners, comprised of EYA, Hoffman Associates, and Regency Centers, to be the city's top-ranked respondent to that RFP. Then in June, we executed a comprehensive agreement with this partnership, and then in September, we actually issued the $120 million in bonds for the new high school. And I will note right up front that what we're discussing today is not related to the construction of the high school. It is exclusively related to the 10-acre private development. The high school actually received their temporary certificates of occupancy just this past week, and the school is actually being used by teachers and by athletes really at this point. The basketball gym is being used for practices and that type of thing. So the building is actually being used right now, and it is a beautiful facility. So congratulations to the school administration, school board, and the construction team for what I think will be a really wonderful asset for the community over the next 50 plus years. The 10-acre development, which is shown on the screen right now, that comprises a mixed-use development that is centered around a commercial street called Commons Drive that has open space in it and areas for recreation in the center, and is lined on both sides with ground floor retail. Some of the major components in the project include an office building. This is all in phase 1. A hotel in phase 1, a condo building, a senior housing building, and a multifamily building that would be anchored with a grocery store on the ground floor that will help all of the retail succeed for the entire area. The project also includes civic spaces that will be centered in this building, as well as conference space. The larger vision also is to have this road go through the Virginia Tech site, and Virginia Tech is in the process right now of finalizing a comprehensive agreement for a new corporate headquarters and a new academic campus that will focus on smart construction techniques, a marriage of their engineering school and their architecture school. And WMATA also is in the process right now of executing an agreement with members of the city's 10-acre development team, as well as Virginia Tech's development team for development on their site. So taken together, the 3 sites are 44 acres and comprise a vision that is quite transformative for this part of the city. But the 10 acres here is within the city limits, and that is the focus of our discussions today. So when we talk about changes to the comprehensive agreement, first I'll just note some of the things that have not changed. The proposed program, in other words, that mix of hotel, office, civic space, senior housing, condos, and multifamily apartments, remain in the ratios that were discussed in the site plan that's been reviewed by the community over the past year. Another thing that's not changed is that the partnership would carry out the demolition of the high school, at least in the trapezoid area that is needed for the high school parking and their entry plaza, that will be completed by May 29th. And then the rest of the high school demolition would then proceed over the subsequent months and be completed in the fall of 2021. The areas that have changed include pushing out the delivery date of the project by approximately 6 months, a reduction in the capitalized ground lease payments, and we'll describe those in the next slide, an increase in ground rent payments over the 99-year term, and some changes to the profit share provisions. So we'll go through these in a bit more detail. So in terms of the kind of the major thing that is impacting the development, the capitalized lease payments, we have 4 payments of $7 million each scheduled for the next 4 years. Those are reduced to $4.5 million payments. So that is a reduction in value to the city from $34.5 million down to $25.5 million. That is significant. That's something that why the city has had to really give deep consideration to these changes and has worked through in a negotiation to try to protect the city's long-term financial interests with this proposed reduction. This is all related just to phase 1. There is a $10 million payment for phase 2, which is not changed in these amendments. The ground rent payments, these are payments that would last for the 99-year term lease for the 10-acre site. Those have been restructured slightly so that they start earlier and they escalate at a higher rate than originally enshrined in the comprehensive agreement. So those are $200,000 payments that start in 2025, 4 years earlier than in the comprehensive agreement where they were slated to start in 2029. They will escalate at a rate of 2.75% versus 2%, which is in the original CA. There's a plus up of $25,000 in year 2031, in addition to that normal 2.75% escalation. So this increase in ground rent, while the $200,000 payments are not, by comparison as large as these $7 million payments that were originally in the comprehensive agreement, they do stretch out over the 99-year term of the lease, and so they do add up to significant value. So those changes actually increase the nominal value of the transaction by $45.7 million. Nonetheless, there is a decrease if you do a present value calculation of the value of the whole deal, a decrease of $3.2 million, not including the profit share provisions, assuming that that assumes that none of those profit share provisions actually produce a profit for the city. That's the present value. There is a nominal value increase overall of $35.8 million because of that increase in the ground rent payment that I just described. The same information is here presented in a chart just so it's a little bit easier to understand. When we signed the comprehensive agreement, that came with a payment to the city, non-refundable, which we call payment number 1 of $6.5 million. That, of course, is unchanged. That's been received by the city and is being used right now to help defray the cost of the debt service for the $120 million high school that we mentioned at the outset. The next 4 payments of $7 million, which are slated in the comprehensive agreement, those are reduced to $4.5 million. In 2025, the condo participation, that's one of the profit share provisions that would kick in 2025, and I'll describe that in a bit more detail in the next slide. And then the ground rent begins in 2026, along with a final payment of $1 million. And those ground rent payments then proceed for the next 99-year term of the lease, and then there's that $25,000 plus up that I mentioned in the year 2031. So some of the profit share provisions, one of them is city participation in potential profit for the condo sales. So the building at the northwest corner of the 10-acre site is a condo building. Those are pro forma, or the developers are expecting those to produce $750 per net square foot on average value for all the condos in aggregate. So if that turns out to be, as an example, $800 per net square foot, that would result in a benefit to the city of $2.25 million, as the city would get 30% of that profit. So that's just an example. That's not a guarantee. Another profit share provision, one that was included in the original comprehensive agreement, was that the city would receive 25% of what's called the land lift at construction loan closing. And what that refers to is that the land will be reappraised at the time of financing, and if the land value is higher than the deal structure for the capitalized land lease payments of $25.5 million, the city receives 50% of that land lift. So we'll see how that works out. That is a potential benefit to the city, and potentially a substantial one, or it could be zero. In the original comprehensive agreement, there was a capital administrative fee on the leasehold, and what that stood for is that every time the leasehold was sold or refinanced over the next 99 years, the city would get 50 basis points on that transaction, essentially operating like a recordation tax. That has now gone away. However, there's a 25 basis point capital administrative fee that is kept on the condos after that would apply after the first sellout of the condos by the developer. Some of the other provisions I mentioned earlier, the high school demolition, that will stay on time in the trapezoid area. That Gilbane needs to complete the front plaza will be completed by May 29th of next year. Actually, I'm sorry, we're in 2021, so May 29th of this year. The Washington Gas Regulator Station. The City Council has approved an easement at West End Park. It's an underground gas depressurization station that will be moved to West End Park. Originally, the cost of that move was to be borne by the developer. That cost is now shifted to the city. The city has a franchise agreement with Washington Gas, and we're currently working with Washington Gas to resolve if Washington Gas will actually pay for that movement. That has not yet been resolved. If it is resolved against the city, that the city pays for it, that cost is approximately $2 million, and we would need to finance that in the current fiscal year out of the capital reserves for the high school, for the city's capital reserves. There's a payment in lieu of taxes, otherwise called a pilot tax abatement, that was part of the comprehensive agreement, which basically sets a pre-planned ramp up of property taxes during the construction period through stabilization of the 10-acre site. That's unchanged. And then the closing date, we're shooting for December 31st of 2021. And so that's 5 months after the current August 3rd, 2021 closing date. So one of the key questions in our analysis of any changes to the comprehensive agreement, along with the intrinsic value of the land, which really drives all the negotiations, but in the backdrop is, of course, the need to finance the debt for the high school. That was always part of our plan of finance for the high school. So this chart lays out our projections for that. In the current fiscal year, we have a drawdown in FY21, which is the current fiscal year. We have a drawdown of capital reserves of $6.4 million. That will bring our capital reserves down to that balance of just over $10.2 million. We have another drawdown in FY22, but in FY23, these payments of $4.5 million will cover the debt service, and so our capital reserve buffer is stabilized through that period until when the tax yield for the 10-acre site comes online. And I think those are relatively conservative projections for the net tax yield for the project. And so then once you get into phase 2, the capital reserves are in a healthy position. But we would stay in that buffer zone and be able to execute the financial plan even with these changes as described to the voters back in the 2017 bond referendum. One thing to note is that in the original comprehensive agreement, there was this concept of a community development authority that would be stood up and appointed by the city council to help finance some of the infrastructure for the 10-acre site. Our community development authority is an entity that is separate from the city that has the ability to issue bonds and then impose a surtax on a given geographical area to pay the debt service for those bonds. The changes in the comprehensive agreement are two. One, that the city will not extend any backing to these bonds that are issued by the CDA. And two, the developer will not pay $2.5 million to the city for creating the CDA. In the original comprehensive agreement, that $2.5 million was really a payment to induce the city to provide moral backing or subject to appropriation backing for the bonds of the CDA. That now has gone away. So the city's risk is essentially, since we will not back these bonds, there is not financial risk to the city. That risk really resides within the 10 acres itself. So the boundary of the Community Development Authority would be the 10-acre site. There would be a surtax imposed on this development that would pay for the debt service for whatever bonds are issued by the CDA. It's envisioned to be approximately $12 million of debt to pay for some of the infrastructure needed for the site. The surtax that's envisioned for this Community Development Authority area is projected to be 15 cents on the real estate property tax. The amendments that we've been discussing, they would be conditioned upon the completion of the demolition and rough grading of the trapezoid area of the high school prior to May 29th, so that Gilbane stays on their completion, their final completion of all the site work outside of the high school by the summer of 2021. And secondly, that there'll be progress on the transactional agreements with clear performance dates in March 1 of 2021 with respect to some of the key components, including the grocer, office developer, and senior component developer. Those are all well underway at the present time, and we feel confident that those performance measures will be met. But the CA amendment is conditioned upon that actually happening. So we're having our town hall meeting today. As noted earlier, that January 11th is the date that City Council will have a public hearing on this and grant final consideration of an amendment to the comprehensive agreement. And January 22nd is the expected date where the existing high school will be turned over to Falls Church Gateway Partners for demolition. And that schedule, we have a regular standing infrastructure planning group between the schools, Falls Church Gateway Partnership, and city staff, just to sort of manage all the issues that come up through this construction period, and these schedules have been reviewed by that group. So those are the slides that I wanted to present, and we'll keep these available to the public if people have questions about them, and we can refer back to them. But let me stop there and turn it over to Susan to help moderate any questions or comments that we get for the public. This meeting is for you. I know that the council members and staff want to hear questions, answer them as best we can, and also receive all comments on this. So we have the benefit of those comments as we work towards a potential resolution of these issues by Monday next week. Thank you. Susan?
All right, we have a number of questions in the chat. I have one by email. You can also raise your hand in the MS Teams platform. There's a little hand at the top. If you're on your desktop, you can click on that and I will call on you. All right, I'm going to start with the questions that are in the chat. Let's see. First, we have what terms of the current agreement that cover what happens if the developer does not comply with the current agreement? What is our remedy if there's a default by the developer?
So in short, the remedy is, a default is that the land reverts back to the city. So that's the principal default provision. And so currently that date is August 3rd of 2021. If that $7 million payment is not made, then that would be a default. And ultimately through that process, the land would simply revert back to the city. And so a big part of this discussion is, one, to provide some additional time and to the development team to execute the contracts they need to execute in order to have this development move forward, but also to change the economics so that those deals can be struck as well and attract the investment ultimately that's going to be needed to construct this project. And that's approximately $400 million of investment that's needed to be raised through private equity and through bank loans for this development.
All right, thank you. Next question. Is there any transportation associated with the project that will go out to bid?
So the project does have a good transportation network. That's one of the important features of this project. And so, these transportation improvements are related to making sure that the traffic flows through this area in a way that will work. So left turns are allowed in, left turns are allowed out of the site at all these intersections. And we are ultimately going to connect these roads up so that there'll be multiple ways and take some of the pressure off of Haycock Road. So those transportation improvements are important. And one other improvement that you can see that is happening right now, VDOT is over in this area is making the linkage for the ability for eastbound travelers on I-66 to be able to go directly to West Falls Church Station. So those who are just trying to access the Metro rail station will be able to bypass this area and get directly to that parking garage. That's another improvement that will be coming online very shortly. Let me also offer for Ms. Betterell or Ms. Friedlander if they'd like to discuss some of the transportation improvements as well.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I guess, Wyatt, are you just talking about kind of the road networks, the NVTA grant work along Route 7 and Haycock that you want us to describe, or the broader sort of 44-acre?
I think maybe start just with the transportation improvements that are part of this 10-acre site, and then the larger vision as well. Sure.
Sure. So as part of the project, the city actually secured a grant with the NVTA for improvements along Route 7 as well as Haycock Road. I think the main improvement there is a dramatic increase in the pedestrian-friendly nature of both of those roads adjacent to the project. So there are going to be 2 increased traffic signals along Haycock Road, one there at the intersection right where the mouse is at Street C, and then another at the intersection above that at Mustang Alley. So that'll improve dramatically pedestrian safety, folks coming from the Federal Realty Shopping Center to our site, The other major improvement is at the intersection of Route 7 and Commons, right where the mouse is now sitting, and that's also going to be a full movement intersection with pedestrian crosswalks. So I think in general, you know, this particular development is going to go a long way at sort of improving the pedestrian experience of that corner. Anyone who's obviously been out to the site today knows it feels a little bit more like a highway with the on-ramp to 66 right there. And, you know, it's not really until you cross over Haycock Road into the city that it starts to feel a little bit more pedestrian friendly versus car oriented.
Thank you, Ms. Betterell. Yep.
All right, I'm going to jump ahead to a question in the chat somewhat related to transportation. How will the delays affect students walking or driving to the schools?
So let me invite maybe Carly Aubrey to join the discussion as well. We've been these are the discussions that we have on a bi-weekly basis with the infrastructure planning group. And Ms. Aubrey, would you like to jump in for that question? And I'll keep this slide up just so people can kind of see the pathways.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Carly Aubrey with planning staff. It's not expected really for the delays to impact the students, the delays related to this comprehensive agreement. The demolition is currently still on the schedule that it always has been. So we are working with the development team and the schools team to come up with a good walking and driving plan for the schools during the demolition of the high school. And then that will continue when the development project actually gets underway. So, but we do plan during the whole, both the demolition of the high school and the construction of the project to have plans in place for students and parents to access the schools.
Great, thank you very much. All right, we have a couple of questions somewhat related to the demolition. So I'm gonna, actually one quick, should be an easy question. Who is the developer of the condo?
So that will be Hoffman Associates. Robin, do you want to add any to that?
No, yeah, that's us. For those that aren't familiar with Hoffman as a company, we actually had a corporate name change last year. We're previously known as PN Hoffman, but have been almost primarily for the larger history of the company, which runs about 30 years back, mainly in DC, but also in Montgomery County, have been a primarily condominium developer. It really wasn't until the last, call it 15 years, that we got more into this larger mixed use development. So that is really our company's kind of core competency, if you will, and we will be the developer of the condo.
Great, thank you very much. All right, now the two questions somewhat related to the demolition. This one is from our emails. Given that the site won't be cleared until June, have you considered going out for bids for deconstruction and salvaging waste? And this might help with LEED certification.
So the demolition schedule, as Carly noted in her response, is basically on the same schedule. So there's not a delay to the demolition. But maybe we could turn this over again to Ms. Betterell to talk about the way that their materials will be reused. We discussed this at our meeting actually just two days ago.
Yeah, I will do my best. Our construction folks are much closer and much more sort of in the weeds of the details. But essentially, we will be abating any hazardous materials in the building and then using what's left over, a lot of the brick, concrete slab structural elements, and kind of grinding that on site to be reused as, you know, kind of fill and rubble for the construction roads during construction. So, you know, the the project does have a LEED ND certification requirement, and that will certainly be helpful in achieving that.
Great. All right, this next question, also related to the demolition, is about urban agriculture. Could FCGP demo an additional half to full acre in May or June and make that space available for the city to demonstrate urban agriculture activities, with the understanding that it would later be bulldozed when the project was progressing? So this seems like a brand new idea. I'm not sure if anyone could speak to it.
You can get, I'll just say real quickly, you know, with the construction site, there's been a lot of discussion with the schools on making sure that the schools have a sufficient parking before their parking lot is completed. So there are portions of the site that will, you know, if you can picture the parking lots that are there now, a lot of those are going to be outside of the fence for the demolition so that the school staff can still use that for parking. And that is how that's anticipated. The area inside the fence, I think, is going to be too dangerous for people to be able to access publicly, and you know, that'll be a demolition site. So it's a neat idea. It's one that I don't think we'll be able to execute, just given all the things that are going to be happening on that site. But urban agriculture is important, and we certainly can look for other opportunities to do that.
All right, thank you. I have another question in the chat, but before I read that, I'm going to remind everyone about how to ask a question. You can raise your hand in the MS Teams app or desktop, and I will call on you. You can also type it into the chat. You can also email townhall@fallschurchva.gov. So the last chat comment we have is a bit more of a statement. You might want to consider putting some of your longer term capital reserves into Bitcoin. So Wyatt, I don't know if you have anything to say about that, or if that's just, again, another new idea.
Well, the city actually is fairly highly regulated by the Commonwealth of Virginia in terms of how we can invest our cash, and the investment instruments that are available to local governments really are related to AAA rated bonds and other very safe instruments. The bad news about that is that the return is infinitesimal, particularly right now. But the purpose is to protect the principal and the use of any city funds. But thank you for that suggestion.
And thank you, Wyatt. All right, at this point, I'm not seeing any emails. I'm not seeing hands raised. I am not seeing anything in the chat, but perhaps we can just give it a moment. Oh, here we go. Here is another question in the chat. Thank you so much. Let's see. Okay, back to asking about intersections. Let's see, they're asking about the intersection of Chestnut, Commons, and Route 7. Is that going to be a traffic light?
Yes, it will be. And so that'll be the intersection of the Commons and Chestnut. And we actually have, the development team has been in charge of getting all of those transportation improvements through the VDOT process. And I think we've recently just had success in that the initial traffic impact studies and other sort of initial approvals by VDOT have been granted. So that's a very positive step. The design of that intersection is of real great importance, both for the traveling public, but also for the commercial success of the whole site. And so we're pleased with the progress that we've made on that. Robin, I don't know if you want to add any to that.
No, we got our VDOT approval, which was sort of the long pole in the tent there. There is some work still to be done with Fairfax County, given that across Route 7, part of that intersection is in the county, and there's actually a site plan amendment required for the property across Route 7 as part of that intersection redesign. But the conversations have been going well, and we don't expect any issues with the county there.
And through the work of of the development team, as well as Carly Aubrey on our staff and many others on staff, there's been just a tremendous amount of coordination with Fairfax County, with VDOT, with Virginia Tech, with WMATA. This is a project that has significant regional benefits and implications, and so all of these partners we've been working with them for 7+ years now on coordination on these types of issues. But now they're getting really down to the precise things and engineered plans on how people get in and out of the site, and so I think all of that lead up work is bearing fruit with the way that the decisions are being made, along with with Fairfax County and with VDOT. But it did take a tremendous amount of effort, and the development team, particularly in the last year, has put tremendous effort into getting those approvals.
All right, the person who asked the question about the intersection seems pleased with that answer, so that's good. Let's see, I have a question from email. Who is the developer of the senior living component?
Robin, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, so we are still kind of in our final negotiations with that group, and I am not sure that they are ready for a public announcement yet. But I will say that they are the developer is a national developer out of Chicago, very highly regarded, and they have a senior living housing operating partner who is relatively the company itself is new in the market. The founder is a longtime senior housing provider, and it's a pretty exciting senior living concept. It's sort of a newer, very high-end concept, and they're a great operator. They have several properties up and running, sort of out in the Midwest area, and they have a couple under development here in the DC metro area. So we look forward to that announcement when we're able to make it.
Thank you very much. All right, a couple more questions coming up in the chat. This is probably more for Wyatt or perhaps Carly. Do you have any insight into the updates on the Virginia Tech and WMATA redevelopments, the timelines involved with those projects?
So I don't have a ton of detail on it. I have two things that, it's sort of big early dates. One is that WMATA, I think, is right now considering their agreement with the development team for the development of their site. And so that's happening this month. And Virginia Tech is scheduled in June to have final consideration of its comprehensive agreement with Rushmark, which is the development arm of HIT Contracting, as for a public-private partnership to build a new Virginia Tech campus, as well as the HIT corporate headquarters and a residential component as well. But Robin, you might have more details on different components if you want to add anything to that.
As best as I understand it, the Virginia Tech development, actually Evan just joined, so he might actually have even a better idea, but that they're going in for their CDP application later this year, and will probably be closely behind the high school site in terms of their development of their first phase, which is the phase that will include the HIT construction corporate headquarters, as well as the new architecture and engineering school for Virginia Tech.
Yeah, and by later this year, that was 2000. They were planning on submitting at the end of last year, 2020. So they should be submitting anytime, sometime in the next week or so. And then the WMATA site, we would likely submit sometime around April.
Great, thank you very much. All right, we have more questions coming up in the chat. Thank you again for asking your questions. We are so happy that you all are here learning more about this. All right, here is a pretty easy one. Is the senior living site an over 55 community or a continuing care community?
So I'm not sure that it falls into either box solely. The trend, as best I understand it, in senior living is to sort of provide really like an age in place sort of a concept. So within one facility would be independent living, which would probably fall more into that over 55 community idea, where essentially you have an apartment and you can opt into or out of services as part of your residency in that apartment. But in that same building, this is going to be a 13 to 15 story tower. There's also assisted living and memory care. And the idea is that once you move in, you can be assured that you can sort of age in place. And as your needs for care increase, you can move within the different levels of care provided in the facility. But the vast majority of the building will be independent living units.
Great, thank you. All right, another question from the chat. Back to the transportation improvements. Where is the process for that? Is there still a business opportunity for working with the government for working on those transportation projects?
So from the city's perspective, the developer is responsible for executing those transportation improvements. And so I would turn that over to Robin or to Evan in terms of your procurement processes, but that might be something we just could handle offline for those who might be interested in submitting bids to the development team.
Yes, is there an email address or anything that we could offer right now, or should I just offer the town hall email and I can get the info to them?
That's great for now, and we'll have that. We'll let the city know who they can direct those inquiries to once we have a better sense.
Perfect. Okay, so for that attendee who is interested in this, if you could email your information to townhall@fallschurchva.gov, and we'll get you in touch with the right people. So thank you for asking that. All right, another question from the chat. Okay, regarding the amendments, is the developer saying that they will not go forward unless the city agrees to these amendments, to these changes?
So I think that is a question for Evan and Robin, and maybe if you all want to provide your response, and then if there's anything to add, I will.
Sure. So in terms of this one, obviously, I hope everyone here can appreciate that the events of 2020 were both highly unanticipated and extraordinarily disruptive to the economy around the world in a way that absolutely no one, I think, could have foreseen or was prepared for. The developer's position back in April was that this was a force majeure event. And, started sort of making plans to try to mitigate the effects of that event as much as possible. And understanding, the city's needs in terms of timing for this project to start, we worked very hard to try and keep the project on its current schedule versus sort of going in, to a pause, essentially, which is what a force majeure event would usually create in a contract. It's sort of a pause on both parties' obligations due to the force majeure event. But again, in trying to be good partners with the city, we did understand that there was significant risk to the city of not starting the project on time. So we worked diligently over the summer to sort of do everything we could to kind of shore up the original program and plan and try to move forward as quickly as possible. The proposal that we brought to the city was our sort of best chance of staying on track and maintaining the program that we knew the city wanted to. So I guess that's sort of that's the best answer that I can give there.
And one thing I will add, the city, I think, has listened carefully to the developer and considered, what we think is in the city's best interest. We did not agree with the force majeure arguments as a legal matter, but we do want to, I think as Robin said, we do have a desire to protect the rich mix of uses that have always been part of this proposal, and also to try to keep the project on schedule. From the city's perspective, the tax yield is very important. And so delay to realizing that tax yield is something that we had to consider. And so, I think ultimately we've tried to work through what was a very tough negotiation, and one that neither party is fully satisfied, but we think we have a way forward. And so that's why I'm bringing these to the city council, ultimately for the city council's ultimate disposition on Monday night.
Thank you. We have more questions in the chat. I'm going to ask one about the debt, Wyatt, and then I'm going to go back to one about the senior living site. So let's see. The city now has a high school and the debt. The original agreement was negotiated to help the city cover the debt. Is the city being left out on this?
Well, one of the key things for the city, as noted in the question, is to protect the taxpayers and to mitigate the high cost of the high school and the debt service for the taxpayers. And we do still accomplish that. I think with the original comprehensive agreement, we did so with a greater degree of buffer for the city's capital reserves and our ability to make investments across the city. But in terms of sort of the baseline of covering the debt service for the high school, with these amendments, we still have protected the city's financial position.
Thank you. Steady stream of questions coming in. Thank you. One more quick reminder for those who have joined late. You can add your question in the chat and I'll read it aloud. You can raise your hand and I'll call on you, and you can go on video to ask your question, or you can email townhall@fallschurchva.gov. All right, so this is another question about this senior living site. Is there a long-term health care or rehab care other than memory care that's going to be in that facility?
So there is assisted living care as well. I'm not exactly sure if that is what you were referring to, but.
Okay, if that person has more questions about it, feel free to type it into the chat.
And one of the kind of the elements of the original approval and the land entitlements is that there is a mix in the senior building of 60% independent living and 40% with a higher level of care, call it assisted living. And all of those definitions are definitions that are understood in the industry. But we're, maintaining that basic idea of a continuum of care as I think, as Robin noted.
Great. All right. I don't have any more questions in the queue, so let's just give it a moment to see if anyone else is typing or going to raise their hand or email. And as a reminder, this is being recorded. We will add this to the project website later today, which is fallschurchva.gov/WFC. That stands for West Falls Church. So you will be able to review this, and anyone who missed it can certainly watch it. All right. I am not seeing any other questions coming in. Wyatt, I think we might be ready to wrap up.
Okay. Well, first, let me just thank everybody for taking time of their Friday afternoon to join us for this discussion. It's really valuable to hear the questions, hear the comments. From the beginning on this project, we've tried to, every step of the way, have town hall meetings and really kind of keep information out in the public every step of the way, because this is so important and it's complex. It has been from the beginning, and so public involvement has always been crucial to our vision and our mission for this project and for our success in this project. So we'll continue that. But if the council does grant approval to these amendments, then I think the next thing that the public will see is the site plan process will get geared up again. There were a number of town hall meetings on the site plan back, almost a year ago now. That will get going again, so people will have all those opportunities to understand the plan and to comment on the plans, along with all of our boards and commissions. I want to thank our developer partners for joining us on this call and for all of your hard work on this project. Carly Aubrey, for you and for all the staff's hard work on this project. City Attorney Carol McCoskey has been key. We do have outside legal counsel that helps us on this extremely complex transaction, but Carol's been just sort of a crucial point for advising the council and myself through all of this as well. So we will close our town hall meeting. Again, thanks everybody for participating, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Excellent town hall. Thank you, Wyatt. Thank you,
Thank you.
Susan.